Okay, the first thing I want to do here as we're going through the snow day activities is to provide a little discussion on the reading for this week, or at least the reading beyond the Think textbook that you've got. The required reading for this week, in addition to your textbook reading, was this article here by Boote and Beile, Scholars Before Researchers on the Centrality of the Dissertation Literature Review in Research Preparation. Now, this was an article, as you can see, that was published a few years ago, actually a little bit better than a decade ago now, in Educational Researcher, which is a publication of, as you can see here, the American Educational Research Association. It's actually one of their 6 or 7 different publications. And in all honesty, the reason I like to use this one as a part of this literature review course is because it really speaks to the importance of the literature review in the overall research process. So if you are looking through this article, one of the things that it may be helpful for you to think about as you're actually reading through is every time you see the word doctoral student, think thesis student, or 6-year student, if you will, CAS student, Certificate of Advanced Study student, and then every time you see the word dissertation, in your mind, think thesis. Because everything that they're saying here about the dissertation process is just as applicable to the thesis process. Now, I won't go through the entire article individually. I'll leave that up to you, and we can talk about this next week if folks are interested. But I do want to point out a couple of things here. As you're reading through this, the particular areas that I want you to focus upon, and I'll use the abstract here as a way of sort of helping you focus what it is that you want to look at. So, the abstract begins, a thorough and sophisticated literature review is the foundation and inspiration for substantial, useful research. Note the 2 words there, foundation and inspiration. The idea that all good educational research is founded upon what we already know in the field, but also that research studies, individual research studies, like the one that you will undertake for your thesis, are inspired by the existing literature that is in the field. Now, by inspired, I mean that you may come across something that's in the field that is of particular interest to you that you would like to attempt to replicate in your particular setting. As you are looking through the literature, one of the things that good research will do is it will make suggestions for future research. And if you see the same 4 or 5 or 2 or 3 suggestions that are being made again and again and again, this may be the inspiration for your particular research. There may be a particular finding that you come across in one study that is really at odds with your own experiences as an educator, and that may be the inspiration for your thesis study. But regardless of where, how that inspiration hits, in addition to good research, a good thesis being founded upon, having a solid foundation for a thesis idea from the existing literature, but in some way, shape, or form, your review of the literature will inspire a particular study from you. So once you have completed this process, once we are at the end of our EDL689 journey, that you will know exactly what you want to study based upon what you've learned about your particular field. So, continuing on, the complex nature of educational research demands a thorough, sophisticated sophisticated review. Although doctoral, think thesis, education is a key means for improving educational research, the literature has given short shrift to the dissertation literature review. This article suggests criteria to evaluate the quality of dissertation, think thesis, literature reviews, and reports a study that examined dissertations at 3 universities. So if you're looking at this, as I'm looking through, this sentence obviously up here is one that is catching my attention. I spent a lot of time talking about it. So as you're reading through the article, I would focus upon, that initial area where it talks about, the role of, or in the case of, to use their words, the centrality of the literature review in this overall research process. The next thing that I think really hits is this idea of this article suggests criteria to evaluate the quality of dissertation literature reviews. So they're actually going to give you some suggestions on what makes for a good literature review and what makes for a bad literature review. Continuing on, acquiring the skills and knowledge required to be educational scholars, able to analyze and synthesize the research in a field of specialization, should be the focal integrative activity of pre-dissertation doctoral education. Such scholarship is a prerequisite for increased methodological sophistication and for improving the usefulness of educational research. All right, so as I'm looking through this, and when I read through the entire article, it still is this, the essentially centrality of the literature review to the research process, and what makes a good literature review that is important. Now, some of the ideas that they talk about here in terms of the skills and knowledge, the ability to analyze and synthesize research in a specific field, these are essentially the things that you should be learning over the course of this EDL689. So this is another area that I might want to, not necessarily read as closely, but skim a little bit. So as I'm looking through this particular article, these are the areas that I'm focusing upon. So that idea of the study that he talks about, and looking at those 3 specific institutions and dissertations at those, that's a little less important for us at this point. Really what's important is, essentially what role does the literature review play in a larger research study, and then how can I use the information that they've got here to judge my own writing as I get through this. One of the other things that I particularly like about this is they do have a really strong literature review in here themselves. So as you look at the citations or the references at the end, as we are moving forward, if you find it difficult to be writing your literature review, if you're struggling to essentially figure out how to go about it, there are a lot of good references here that they provide that should be useful to you in terms of getting advice on to overcome those blocks that may impede your progress when we get to the point of the literature review.